In an escalating trade war that threatens to reshape global economic dynamics, President Donald Trump's recent imposition of significant tariffs on Chinese imports has sparked a fierce backlash from Beijing. With the world already grappling with the ramifications of previous tariffs, the latest measures have further strained relations between the two economic superpowers, creating uncertainty across global markets. China's reaction was swift and unequivocal. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce condemned the tariffs as unilateral bullying and warned that the ongoing trade tensions would not yield a clear victor. No side can come out as a winner, the ministry stated, urging the United States to consider diplomatic avenues rather than resorting to restrictive economic measures. This sentiment was echoed by Wang Yi, China's top diplomat, who emphasized that negotiations could not proceed without the removal of these tariffs. If the U.S. side keeps on pressuring and even blackmailing China, surely will be resolute in its countermeasures, he declared. The tariffs, which were introduced during Trump's second term, add to an already heavy financial burden on American companies reliant on Chinese imports. Analysts have noted that the economic ramifications extend beyond the U.S. and China, affecting the global supply chain and potentially leading to price increases for consumers. Businesses across various sectors are reassessing their operations, with many exploring alternative supply chains to mitigate the impact of the tariffs. Countries like Vietnam, India, and Mexico are emerging as potential new hubs for production as U.S. firms seek to adapt to the evolving landscape. As tensions rise, speculation mounts over potential Chinese countermeasures. Previous strategies have seen Beijing impose tariffs on American agricultural products, significantly impacting U.S. farmers. This time, experts predict a range of responses, including the possibility of imposing additional tariffs on U.S. exports, tightening investment regulations for American companies in China, and controlling exports of rare earth minerals, which are critical for the manufacture of high-tech products and military equipment. The outcome of these retaliatory actions could have profound implications for U.S. industries that depend heavily on these resources. The prospect of a summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping to resolve tensions now appears remote. Although Trump had previously expressed interest in a face-to-face meeting, the recent escalation in tariffs has led to doubts about the feasibility of such a dialogue. China has made it clear that any discussions must be rooted in mutual respect and fairness rather than coercive tactics. Until the U.S. takes a step back from its current stance, Beijing is unlikely to engage in negotiations it deems inequitable. The implications of these tariffs are reverberating throughout the global economy. Stock markets have reacted with caution, reflecting fears that prolonged trade hostilities could slow economic growth worldwide. "We are already seeing signs of instability in the supply chain," noted one market analyst, who warned that consumer prices could rise as companies grapple with increased costs. The ongoing trade war is pushing businesses to seek new strategies, including diversifying their supply chains and exploring new markets. As the situation continues to evolve, all eyes remain on the next moves from both Washington and Beijing. Will the two nations find a way to bridge their differences, or are they headed toward an even deeper economic standoff? The answers will likely shape the trajectory of global trade and economic relations for years to come. With the stakes this high, the international community watches with bated breath, eager to see how this titanic struggle unfolds. In a world increasingly defined by trade tensions and geopolitical maneuvering, recent developments highlight a complex landscape where economic policies and diplomatic relations intertwine. The ongoing trade war between the United States and China has intensified under President Donald Trump as new tariffs threaten to reshape supply chains and provoke retaliatory measures from Beijing. Concurrently, a burgeoning relationship between China and Russia is gaining traction, with discussions set to unfold within the frameworks of BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO). The implications of these developments are profound, not only for the nations involved but also for the global economy at large. On April 3, 2025, President Trump announced a sweeping set of tariffs affecting nearly all of America's trading partners, with China facing some of the steepest increases. In a bold statement, Trump claimed, "If you look at that, China first rose 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. He proposed a reciprocal tariff of 34% on Chinese imports, a move the Chinese government swiftly condemned as a typical act of unilateral bullying. The anticipated impact of these tariffs is significant, particularly as they come on top of existing levies, raising the total tariff rate on Chinese goods to a staggering 54% for many products. This aggressive trade stance not only targets China but also extends to several Southeast Asian nations, including Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, which are seen as critical nodes in the regional supply chain. Vietnam, and others in the periphery, are collateral damage in what is shaping up to be the most aggressive realignment of U.S. trade policy in a generation, noted Stephen Innes of SPI Asset Management. Such tariffs complicate the existing dynamics as Chinese companies have increasingly relocated production to these countries to evade previous tariffs. The economic fallout is expected to be multifaceted. Deborah Elms from the Heinrich Foundation remarked China and the Chinese will have to retaliate. They are not going to be able to sit back and watch this. Indeed, the Chinese Commerce Ministry has promised resolute countermeasures, with experts suggesting a range of responses from reciprocal tariffs to more stringent regulations on American companies operating within China. As the U.S. China trade war escalates, another significant geopolitical development is unfolding: the strengthening ties between China and Russia. Following a recent meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Moscow, preparations are underway for a high-profile visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping in May. Putin characterized Xi's upcoming visit as an event in its own right, highlighting the importance of bilateral relations in the context of global cooperation platforms such as the United Nations and BRICS. This growing partnership reflects a shared interest in countering Western influence and coordinating responses to economic pressures stemming from the U.S. According to Konstantin Baraboshkin, an expert on Sino-Russian relations, such frequent contacts are due to good relations, but on the other hand, we are two major powers with overlapping interests that require constant coordination. The discussions are expected to cover a range of issues, including economic collaboration, sustainable development initiatives, and the potential elimination of visa requirements to boost trade and cultural exchange. As China navigates the turbulent waters of international trade while fostering closer ties with Russia, it faces significant challenges at home. The internal pressures from the Chinese Communist Party to address rising inequality is highlighted by Angela Zhang in her recent analysis of China's regulatory environment complicate the landscape further. The country is grappling with a tech crackdown that has seen substantial losses in market value among major firms, ultimately leading to a refocusing on socially beneficial projects. The juxtaposition of escalating U.S. tariffs and the deepening Sino-Russian alliance encapsulates a broader narrative of shifting global power dynamics. As nations position themselves strategically in anticipation of the next moves in this trade chess game, the potential for economic fallout looms large. Experts predict that the situation is likely to worsen before improving, with the U.S. and China inevitably heading toward negotiations to seek a resolution. In conclusion, the interplay between trade policies and international relations is reshaping the global economic landscape. As tariffs rise and alliances strengthen, the coming months will be critical in determining the future of trade relationships and geopolitical stability. The focus now shifts to how these nations will navigate the complexities ahead, with the outcomes likely to have lasting implications for the global economy, in a dramatic escalation of the ongoing trade war. President Donald Trump has imposed a new wave of tariffs on Chinese imports, raising the average levy to over 60%. This latest move, which comes during Trump's second term, has triggered a fierce response from Beijing as tensions between the world's two largest economies reach new heights. China's Commerce Ministry has denounced the tariffs as unilateral bullying, warning that such actions will only exacerbate the conflict and lead to retaliatory measures. The Chinese government, visibly angered by these developments, has vowed to respond decisively. Officials have indicated that potential countermeasures could include imposing additional tariffs on U.S. exports, tightening investment regulations for American companies operating in China, and even controlling the export of rare earth minerals, elements crucial for the production of electronics and military equipment. If the U.S. side keeps on pressuring and even blackmailing China, surely will be resolute in its countermeasures, stated Wang Yi, China's top diplomat, emphasizing the need for the U.S. to lift tariffs before any meaningful negotiations can take place. The implications of these tariffs extend beyond the immediate economic relationship between the U.S. and China, affecting global markets and supply chains. Analysts warn that the escalation could hinder economic growth worldwide as companies that rely on Chinese imports face rising costs that may ultimately be passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Stock markets have reacted with caution, reflecting concerns over prolonged instability in international trade. Despite the pressure from the U.S., Beijing appears unfazed and is even exuding a surprising confidence. Many experts suggest that China is better positioned to weather this storm, given its vast consumer market and the ability to pivot to alternative trading partners. The Chinese government has indicated its intent to explore new markets and reinforce existing trade relationships, potentially mitigating the impact of U.S. tariffs. The potential fallout from this trade war also raises questions about a possible summit between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. While Trump had previously shown interest in meeting with Xi to discuss the trade rift, the latest developments have cast doubt on the feasibility of such a meeting. China insists that any dialogue must be rooted in mutual respect and fairness, rejecting what it sees as coercive tactics from Washington. As the trade war intensifies, the global community is left wondering what the next moves from both capitals will be. Will China retaliate swiftly? Or will it adopt a more measured approach? And how will U.S. businesses adapt to the new reality of elevated tariffs? The answers to these questions will shape the future of international trade and could have lasting effects on the global economy. With negotiations stalling and both nations entrenched in their positions, the path forward remains uncertain. The world watches closely as these economic titans navigate a complex web of diplomacy and trade, hoping for resolution yet bracing for potential escalation. In recent days, geopolitical tensions in the Taiwan Strait have escalated, marked by China's military drills aimed at both Taiwan and the United States. Analysts suggest these exercises are not merely exercises of military power but serve a dual purpose: to test the United States' strategic resolve and to signal dissatisfaction with the current U.S. administration's stance on Taiwan. This multifaceted approach reflects China's growing ambitions on the global stage and its desire to reshape the regional balance of power. The Chinese People's Liberation Army (PLA) announced a series of military drills around Taiwan, which they positioned as a response to what they termed Taiwanese independence forces under President William Li's administration. However, experts argue that the timing of these drills following U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's visit to Japan indicates a broader strategy aimed at probing the U.S. response to China's military maneuvers. Lin Yingyu, an assistant professor at Tamkang University, noted that these exercises are designed to gauge Washington's commitment to Taiwan's defense as well as to assess President Donald Trump's position ahead of a potential summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. In the wake of these developments, the discussions surrounding cybersecurity in the U.S. have also intensified, particularly concerning small businesses. As critical components of the American economy, small businesses represent nearly half of the workforce and contribute significantly to the nation's GDP. Yet as they increasingly adopt digital technologies, they become vulnerable to cyber attacks, particularly from state-sponsored actors like those from China. U.S. intelligence agencies have warned of groups such as Volt Typhoon and Silk Typhoon infiltrating essential services and infrastructure, thereby posing a direct threat not only to individual businesses but also to national security. Congress has begun to respond with bipartisan initiatives aimed at fortifying cybersecurity measures for small businesses. Senators Shelley Moore Capito and John Hickenlooper have reintroduced the Ensure Cybersecurity Act designed to clarify cyber insurance policies and expand access to cybersecurity education. This legislative push underscores the recognition that protecting small businesses is critical to safeguarding the broader economic framework and national security. Retired Lieutenant General John Cain, President Trump's nominee to lead the Joint Chiefs of Staff, also highlighted the pressing need for the U.S. military to bolster its capabilities to deter potential Chinese aggression. In his testimony to the Senate Armed Services Committee, Cain emphasized that the U.S. must enhance its defense industrial base, which is currently unprepared for a prolonged conflict, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. He pointed out that while China has made significant strides in military modernization, it still faces shortcomings that the U.S. can exploit if it acts decisively. The convergence of military posturing in the Taiwan Strait and the critical need for cybersecurity resilience illustrates the complexities facing the U.S. as it navigates its strategic priorities. The urgency of addressing these issues is magnified by the increasing frequency of Chinese military drills and cyber intrusions, which serve as stark reminders of the vulnerabilities in both national defense and economic infrastructure. As tensions mount, the U.S. must recalibrate its approach not only in its military readiness but also in how it protects its economic lifelines. The future will likely see an increased emphasis on collaboration among federal, state, and local governments to enhance cybersecurity measures, as well as a more robust military posture in the Indo-Pacific to counterbalance China's ambitions. The stakes are high and the time for decisive action is now, as both military and cyber threats continue to evolve. As China and India commemorate 75 years of diplomatic relations, the celebration is overshadowed by a history of border tensions and unresolved territorial disputes. The optimism that marked the signing of the Panchshil Agreement in 1954, a treaty aimed at fostering peace and friendship, has long been replaced by a complex relationship characterized by mistrust and military standoffs. The Sino-Indian War of 1962 exposed the fractures in their partnership, and recent clashes, notably the deadly encounter at Galwan in June 2020, have only deepened the divide. Despite the historical context, both nations have attempted to project a sense of camaraderie. On April 1, 2025, Chinese President Xi Jinping congratulated Indian President Draupadi Murmu, suggesting that it is essential for China and India to be partners of mutual achievement. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi echoed this sentiment, highlighting the responsibility of both nations to promote peace and development as ancient civilizations. However, beneath the surface of cordiality lies a complex web of military posturing and strategic maneuvering. The recent thaw in relations, marked by a limited understanding on border patrolling reached in October 2024, has not significantly altered the military deployments along the disputed line of actual control (LAC). While both sides have engaged in diplomatic dialogues, including meetings between special representatives and foreign ministers, the military presence remains unchanged. This stasis raises questions about the sincerity of the supposed normalization of relations. Modi's recent comments claiming a return to normalcy at the border contrast sharply with the assessments of military officials like Army Chief Upendra Dwivedi, who described the situation as sensitive but stable. The discrepancy between political rhetoric and military realities illustrates the challenges of managing public perception while navigating a fraught bilateral relationship. Underlying these diplomatic overtures are China's rigid terms for engagement. Although Beijing expresses a desire for friendly ties, it insists on non-negotiable conditions that New Delhi may find difficult to accept. This dynamic plays into India's concerns over a potential loss of regional influence and the consolidation of Chinese power in South Asia. As Modi's government pursues a cautious approach driven by economic vulnerabilities and geopolitical shifts, there are fears that India may inadvertently accept a secondary role in the region. In late 2024, a patrolling agreement was reached, reportedly allowing India to regain access to some areas in Ladakh, while granting the Chinese People's Liberation Army (PLA) patrolling rights in Arunachal Pradesh. This concession raises eyebrows in New Delhi, especially as military leaders have been reticent to discuss the specifics of these arrangements publicly. The implications of such concessions could signal a broader trend of India conceding ground to a more assertive China. China's own internal challenges, including economic instability and social discontent, complicate its foreign policy decisions. Externally, its strategic competition with the United States places additional pressure on its engagement with India. Beijing's aggressive infrastructure projects, such as a massive hydropower dam on the Yarlung-Zangbo River, further exacerbate India's security concerns and ecological fears. At the same time, the economic relationship between India and China is marked by increasing imbalances. India's imports from China are set to reach record highs while exports have contracted, widening the trade deficit. Despite Modi's administration seeking to balance these dynamics, China's economic maneuvers, including restrictions on technology transfers, threaten India's aspirations to become a global manufacturing hub. The geopolitical landscape is further complicated by the potential return of Donald Trump to the U.S. presidency, with his administration's trade policies posing additional challenges for India. Trump's declaration of a trade war and the imposition of tariffs could force India into a more confrontational stance with China or leave it sidelined in favor of U.S. China negotiations. As the complexities of the India-China relationship continue to unfold, the strategic question remains: can India navigate this increasingly challenging dynamic without compromising its national interests? Modi's cautious accommodation strategy may buy time, but it risks solidifying China's dominance in the region. Both nations stand at a crossroads, where the future of their bilateral ties will hinge on their ability to manage historical grievances while addressing contemporary challenges. The coming months will be critical in determining whether India can assert its strategic interests or will remain overshadowed by its more powerful neighbor.